Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to this week's live chat. I'm super excited to be talking about one of my favorite things, machine quilting. If you're watching live, just know that Jessica is behind the camera as always, monitoring the chat and writing down your questions. So if you have any questions about what we're talking about, definitely put them on there because I'd love to answer them. I'm excited today. We're going to talk about design ideas for quilting animals and faces. Now, this topic came straight from you all. I love the suggestions because, sometimes it's hard to think about exactly what to talk about, but this was a request and I thought, oh, this is a great one. I love stuff that I have lots of pictures of from the past so I can show lots of examples. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into it. I will say real quick, I just want to do a quick recap that we're starting our newest Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along soon. So that's going to start July 1st. Super excited. The whole video series about picking out designs and quilting big or irregular shaped background areas of your quilts. Now I know I did a whole live chat on this last week, so if you were here last week you already know the deal, but just in case, just want to put it back out there. It's totally free to participate and I'm looking forward to it. I love showing different techniques and different design ideas within those techniques, and I'm really excited about this one. Negative space is kind of one of those things that can be scary because it's like, or backgrounds can be scary because there's so many options. And so even coming up with the design ideas and what I wanted to talk about in the class was a lot of fun. So I'm super excited to start that. And if you want to quilt along with me, you can order the custom panel I designed for the challenge. So I know I've already talked about all this, but it's a great way to practice along with me. We'll work together on the same panel, and when you're done, you'll have a clear, a finished product. You'll be able to look at it and be so proud of yourself and how far you've come. Now those are available for pre-order, available in 2 sizes. We kind of have a bigger one and a smaller one, and then those should ship mid-June. So we're cutting our little hearts out here, but super excited about that. Now, I designed the panel, again, I know most of you already know this, I designed the panel so that you could either keep it whole or cut it into thirds and turn it into wall hangings. And I'm loving the wall hanging idea. And so I did a video, if you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, you probably got an alert that I showed how to use facing on your panels to finish them and give you that kind of cool look on the background. So you can kind of see, it takes away the binding and no kind of like borders. So it's kind of fancy and artsy. I kind of like it. Anyway, so be sure to check that out if you want to see how I did that. Now, just for a limited time, we have some pins, custom pins I designed for the series. It's kind of like our little flair to be proud of how far we've come, and you'll get a free pin with the purchase of your panel. And for a limited time, not much longer, so we're going to end this deal pretty quickly, but you can get the large panel. If you buy the large panel, you can get the small panel for 50% off using the promo code PANEL. So all of the details are in the description box below. I hope you'll consider quilting along with us. We have so much fun, and I cannot wait until July 1st to start that. So if you want to learn more, like I said, you can click the link in the description box, you can scan the QR code, or you can visit quiltingismytherapy.com. So that's been on our plate here, but I'm excited to we kind of showed it off yesterday, and so I'm excited to see it all come to fruition. Anyway, if you have any questions about it, again, you can reach out to us and let us know. All right, now the topic at hand, quilting design or design ideas for quilting animals and faces. So when this topic or this question came up, I was like, oh, sure, I can do a presentation on that. But you have to know, first and foremost, I try to avoid it if at all possible. It's tricky to quilt something that everybody knows what's supposed to look like. That's why I don't like quilting hearts. I mean, we know exactly what a heart is supposed to look like, and if it's not perfectly symmetrical, we can tell pretty quick. And so anytime I get a face or an animal, I'm always like, ugh. But I do have some design or suggestions, and I will say before we get into it though, it's totally subjective. Do what you like. I mean, there's no wrong way to quilt any of these. And so just because I'm sitting here because I'm too much of a wimp to approach quilting a face doesn't mean that you have to be as well. So when we're talking about animal faces or animals or faces, I'm not necessarily talking about quilts like this. So this is a quilt where the blocks obviously make up the big beautiful butterfly. That's not too scary. If it's a pieced bigger thing, it's actually easier because I can just look at the individual chunks and fill that in. If I do get something like that, I'll look for details that I can put in the background areas. So it's a butterfly, let's put some feather antenna on it. But the approach, though, to quilting that is not a whole lot different than it would be if those blocks were laid out on a grid. I just kind of look at the blocks and let the rest come together. Another example of this, again, this one was pieced by Tula. The last one was as well, Tula Pink. This is the moth quilt that was in the book we did together. It's a smaller quilt, but it's still like one big pieced kind of animal. So I just kind of did some textures and stuff in there. So it's kind of funny. The big animals don't scare me, and the little ones don't scare me. It's the middle size, and we'll see why here in just a second. So another example of some pieced animals. I was just every time I get ready to do my live chat or I put together all my pictures, I go down the rabbit hole of past quilts. And so I found this one. Again, you know, if I quilt for Tula Pink, I'm going to be quilting a lot of animals or faces. This was her serpentine or serpent monster quilt. And what I love about that kind of animal is it's abstract. There's nobody out there who's going to tell me what a Loch Ness monster is supposed to look like, right? I get creative decision on that. So here you can kind of see I put some scales in there with some clamshells and just did some echoing. So I love it when they're fictional animals as well, because there's, again, no rhyme or reason. All right, but big animals, fine. Little animals are great too. When I'm looking at smaller, faces or smaller animals, I'm going to quilt as little as possible in them. It's just so easy to mess it up, right? So if I'm going to quilt along the lines of the design. I might add some details here and there, nothing too ornate or nothing too crazy, just because, like I said, I feel like it's really easy to make it too fussy and then it just overwhelms everything. So in this example, this block was only about this big. And so just kind of lightly going in and kind of going around some of the detail there. Perfect, right? Tula's already did all the design work. All I have to do is follow her lines. So a lot of the pictures I have are actually like this, where you can kind of see where I've popped in with just a little bit of detail in some places. This particular, this frog is about the same size. I could go in and quilt around that fly in the center of the stomach and around each pupil and all that, but again, I don't want to put so much quilting right there because it's going to camouflage the beautiful fabric and it will just look, in my opinion, just looks kind of off. But you can see where I've kind of went around some of that detail, around his mouth, kind of around the eyes, but nothing, again, too crazy. Now this should be kind of encouraging, right? Like if you have a smaller face, you're like, oh, just keep it simple and move on. Save our effort for somewhere else. Another example, cute little panda polka dot clamshell shape. It's hard to see the quilting in there, but let me tell you, there's not much. If it's smaller, less is more. Not only does it keep the quilting from overwhelming it, but if I'm gonna put some filler stuff around it, it helps it kind of pop from the quilt and you can see it a little bit better. I mean, that's the artistic reason I'm gonna give it, right? Another example, this was from a layered quilting video series I did where we kind of appliqued on a machine quilting project, but here's a bird. You can see a little bit of the detail in the wings. Again, nothing too crazy. The fact of the matter is it's too small to really do a whole lot of anything anyway. I found these quilts I did for Tula, I don't remember, a couple years ago from her Roar collection. And so we had some dinosaurs and some other examples here. Again, when I was pulling the pictures, I'm like, oh, I'm obviously a one-trick pony when it comes to this. But when you're looking at the print, just kind of, this is going to sound artsy or weird, but just kind of flow where the lines should go. For instance, in these little triceratops going around, in the border, just kind of where she already had those outlines, just kind of pop in there and back out. And each one probably isn't the same. I'm just kind of quilting it down and then moving on. In my opinion, if it's bigger than a couple inches, I don't want to just leave it unquilted because sometimes the lack of quilting can be distracting as well. So that would be why I put a little bit of those details in just to kind of help hold it down. And then here's the center of it, Mr. T-Rex there. Again, you can kind of see, it's hard to tell, but just a little bit of detail. There's not a ton of quilting right there, saving the denser quilting for around it. And then more little dinosaurs. Now, I do want to point out, when I take the pictures and I edit these photos, I have it position the light so that you can see the quilting. I mean, I love Tula and I love her fabric, but I want to see the quilting too. So when you look at the pictures, it looks kind of like very out there or like very noticeable, but I promise without the side light, it doesn't look quite like that. And then this quilt, she actually gave me two. So two colorways of the same quilt, and so you can kind of see just a little bit of the differences there. Now in this block, there is an animal in the center, but he kind of blends in with the rest of the print. And so instead of going over it, instead of like outlining it, I just did a nice continuous curve design over the top of it. So depending on how vibrant or how much it shows up, again, that's just my opinion there. And then more triceratops working their way through there. Now I could have just quilted a nice feather and that would have looked beautiful, but I did want to highlight, those adorable animals in the border. So it didn't take too much longer, so that was nice. Now this is actually a quilt we saw in a previous live chat where I talked about quilting this quilt for her, and I can't remember, I'm blanking on the name now. But lots of fussy cut animals. Again, smaller sizes, which are great, just adding a little bit of detail. And you can kind of see just a little hint of where I'm kind of going in and out of there. If there is some kind of design on the animal I can use as a guide, then I'm going to do that, right? There's like a little line where the arm comes up. I'm going to follow that. But sometimes I get to make it up on my own, and that's fine too. And so here we can see this little kitty cat, which is just so adorable. And so just working my way in there a little bit, nothing too crazy, and then saving all the other quilting fur on the outside. I will say that using a blending thread color will really help here. So if I don't want the quilting to be the first thing you notice when you look at it, I want it to be like the second thing. A thread color that blends in will be really helpful. If you're super nervous about the quilting showing up, then the thinner the thread is, the less it's going to show. So you can maybe experiment with a 60 weight thread or something like that where it will kind of blend in. Now sometimes I don't go around the detail of the animal. In this example, that was a tiny little dog, and so instead of trying to go around all that detail, I just did a continuous curve design from corner to corner. Not really quilting the dog, but kind of going around it a little bit. So picking designs that can help me avoid crossing over their face. I don't know if that's just a weird thing for me or if that's just universal, but it feels weird like quilting right over an animal's face, so I pick a design that'll go around outside of it. Now this is a perfect example. It's kind of hard to tell, but she had fussy cut little mice or little animals. And so in this star, I was like, okay, I don't want to go around each one. They're kind of small, but I did a dot to dot kind of diamond design or a diagonal line design that avoids the center of it. So since she fussy cuts a lot of her animals, the faces are usually pretty much in the center, and I can usually find designs that will work their way around it without having to actually quilt it. So I guess the moral of the story is either do it or avoid it. Both are correct. And then more cute little examples. I wanted to put all of the cute little animals on the live chat, but then I figured we would be here for months. But definitely a lot of cute little guys there. So again, her frog, different one than the last one, but you can kind of see just a little bit of the outline. Her fabrics are so beautiful and like just so detailed, but I don't have to quilt every little detail. That would be impossible, truly. I don't need to go around every leaf. I can just kind of go around the curves, and sometimes I'll just approximate it, right? Like if she has a flower here, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just do a flower over the top of it. It might not follow the lines perfectly, but it's a flower on a flower, so it's fine. So you don't even have to go like perfectly detailed there. And then another kitty cat. She had like cats in all different positions, so I got practice quilting them in all different ways. And then this guy's so cute, little doggy. So again, same deal, different pictures, right? Just pretty simple within the animal, nothing too crazy for those smaller ones. And then here's the last example there, just the octopus. And then you can kind of see where I went around the animal, but in the rest of it just did some swirls and stuff. So for smaller animals, that's the way to go. But sometimes that's not the case, right? Sometimes we get those mid-sized faces or blocks. Here we can see, this is another quilt for Tula. I don't remember the name of it, Tula, but it's so cute, but it has those faces in those cameos. And when she gave me this, that was the first thing I saw, and I'm like, okay, this is fine. I am an adult. I can handle it. It's going to be okay. But it is a little scary because those were bigger. So I couldn't do just I needed to do a little bit more quilting so it wasn't so unquilted, but it's really difficult to do a face. So here we can kind of see this beautiful face. I did some hair. I went around some of the design in the shirt, but in the face, like I went along the eye patch, and then I even just kind of did like the nose. It's hard to see, but it's very minimal in the face. Again, I think that's just because it's so easy to notice if it's wrong, so I just try not to. So popping in through some of these, like here, even though that was a bigger cameo, at least the face was smaller, so hair is no problem. But you can almost see under the eye where I kind of came in right along the line, did the eye, and then kind of went right back out the other way. So there were times where I had to take creative license and add some quilting in there to get to where I needed to go. The truth of the matter is, I'm not a show quilter. Now, I love to quilt stuff to death. Quilt it till it's dead and add more has always been like my motto. But I'm not a show quilter, so I'm not going to start a new line of quilting for each little thing here, even for Tula. She wouldn't want me to do that anyway. So I'm using the quilting to kind of get in and out so I can do that in an efficient manner. So you can kind of see just very minimal. I think I might have went around the lips where there's already some kind of design. I did, but then keeping it nice and simple. Now this was the quilt that got some comments from our type chat before I started. People were talking about the cute little bears on there and the little feather going behind there. This was another quilt by Tula, but it features Elizabeth Hartman's pattern. And Elizabeth Hartman, if you know her quilts, are gorgeous, adorable animals of all different kinds, and they're all like this big. So they're all to that middle size where I'm like, okay, I gotta do this. So when I'm looking at blocks like that, again, I'm trying to keep it fairly simple for myself. I might add some details, right? I might look to the real animal and maybe use some details, but it's not gonna be a literal representation. Like, I'm not gonna be thread painting here, right? This is just a little bit different. So here we can kind of see this first little bear. So bears are furry. So I did some wavy lines just to kind of look like hair. Now I will say, when I started this quilt, I got about halfway through before I decided what I was going to do on the bears. Like, it was a struggle because it was like every fabric was different. But I went with wavy lines on the top because bears are furry. And then around the muzzle, I did the wavy lines, but I just did it where they kind of followed the shape. Now, thankfully, this was pieced in all her beautiful fabrics, so you really couldn't see the quilting a whole lot. But when it came to that snout and those ears, that was kind of the tricky part, because I'm like, I didn't want to do wavy lines over the snout just because I want it to pop out. But I'm like, I mean, what does a bear snout look like? Like, I don't know. And so after a while, I realized, oh, you know what? I'm making this way harder than it needs to be. I'm just going to echo, right? Echoing is always the option. So you can kind of see I did some echoing around that white, added just a little bit of like diagonal lines, kept it fairly basic, just so it wouldn't be too fussy. And then again, just echoed in the ears. So when in doubt, just echo. If it is a pieced quilt, it's probably pieced in sections, so you're going to have a lot of straight lines to follow, and that's good, right? We'll see what it looks like when it's a printed panel, but just echo. Echo is always a great option. So a couple more of the faces, just so you can kind of see the different details here. Even though that fabric was, normally I would go around the geometric look of the fabric, here I was kind of like torn, right? Because like I love to, especially that print, I love to quilt those diamonds, but I went ahead and did the wavy lines with that. So again, is there some like real life takeaway feature that you can use? And again, not thread painting. I'm not like looking up like what is a brown bear versus a black bear. I'm just kind of like going for just a hint of that inspiration. Anybody that looks at this quilt will know immediately that it's a bear. And so my quilting isn't going to move the needle on that at all. Move the needle. That's kind of a quilting joke. But I can still look at that. So you can see a little bit of the texture there with the wavy lines. And then the eyes were only about, I think, ½ inch big, an inch big. They were tiny. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave those unquilted. We're going to just call it good. So that's why those are like that. I found a couple of random pictures of a quilt I did with cats on it, another Elizabeth Hartman pattern. I can't remember the name. And I don't have a picture of the whole quilt, so I don't know what I did with that. But here you can see the same kind of idea. A lot of outlining, a lot of echoing, and maybe a little detail. Just a little tongue, little whiskers. Again, just it's too easy to mess up, and I don't like to pick a fight I can't win. But you can kind of see some other details here. That's probably my favorite little kitty cat right there. But anyway, so looking for real life details and keeping it pretty simple. Okay, so that's for big cat or big animals, but what do we do about faces? So this was actually one of the very early quilts I did for Tula. It was a printed panel. So that's already kind of like a uh-oh, because since it's not pieced, it's not angular, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. Thankfully, she jumped in pretty quick and told me what to do, and I realized that was the best advice, and I just stuck with it. She said she wanted the hair over the top, the ship really cool, and then just a grid for the face. So I'm like, hey, I can do that, and so that is what I did. Just did some grid work right there. So sometimes just, I don't know, quilting that grid over the top of it. Now, it's a little scary, especially if it's like, I don't know, like, a more detailed picture or detailed photo there. But imagine though, you're looking through a fence, right? If you're watching a baseball game, you're looking through a fence. After a while, you don't even notice it anymore. If that design is consistent in its size and texture, you'll just kind of end up looking through it. So it's scary to quilt over stuff like that, but sometimes the best option is just to keep it nice and consistent throughout. Now I found this quilt that was actually made for me by my friend Irene, and it has like all the little people that worked at our shop at the time. And she did this, she quilted it, pieced it, so cute. I mean, look, that's me in the middle. The little quilting is my therapy shirt. But she quilted it perfectly in the way that I probably would have too, like just a nice all over kind of design. It's, she's not only making face blocks, they're of people that she knows, right? That's also really easy to mess up, because then I could be like, my nose isn't that big. But again, a nice, consistent overall texture. Using a thread color and a neutral thread color obviously helps that blend as well. So again, sometimes when you're faced with it, just a nice all over. And this is a couple pictures of animals. I'm not sure where they came from, but wood grain over the top of it. So another example of just an all-over design over the top of it. I don't make a lot of Elizabeth Hartman quilts because I don't piece a lot, honestly, and I like them quicker and easier than. But if I was going to piece one and quilt it, I would do just the wood grain over it. I think it's just a great idea because it just lets you look through the quilting and then you can see the beautiful designs of it. So looking to that. So sometimes you don't have to make it so difficult. Just doing an overall design over the whole thing could be the way to go. All right, last little bit here. So this is a panel, Yellowstone panel. So funny. I was at a trunk show one time. The panel's about this big, yay big, and it's one of my first attempts at like thread painting, where I'm picking out like thread colors to actually like make details. It's a pre-printed panel, and so when I showed it at a guild, somebody asked me how I got the buffalo on there, and I said, no, it's a printed panel. It's on there. She goes, no, but how did you get it on there? And so I told her that twice. And after the third time, I told her I appliqued it because she just didn't believe me. So I'm like, oh, I appliqued it on there. But if you see it, no, I did not applicate on there. Again, with the panels, the problem is they're curvier, they're not pieced, so you have a lot more details here. Again, even though this was more, I'll say thread playing, I think thread painting sounds too fancy, I'm still using kind of the panel itself as a guide. Where the colors were, I just kind of added some fur, some wavy lines and just kind of followed the design of the animal. I love how it turned out, but just know that if you're dealing with a panel like that, you don't have to quilt everything the same way. So the big buffalo is kind of in the front. He's the one that gets the more ornate detail, and then as we go to the background, it gets less detail there. So you don't have to do it over the top that way either. So I know that's kind of like a lot of pictures to go through, but it's fun, I think, to always see different examples of all that. The one thing I will say, the one thing I did not have a lot of is picture quilts. That is the question there. What do you do with a picture that's printed on a piece of fabric that, is like this big and you're quilting it? Oh, those are tricky. So that would be where I would try to avoid if possible, or do like a crosshatch or something consistent over the top of it. Because again, it can go wrong really fast, or I feel like it can look wrong really fast, but again, that's just my opinion. Do we have any questions? Good deal. Are there a lot of thread cuts in the Tula quilts or creative traveling? Mostly creative traveling. When it comes to like efficiently working through that, if you see a quilt, it's all about the fabric color. A quilt I have for her right now that I don't have pictures of yet, but I'll do a whole talk about it eventually, has such strong colors that I've changed thread colors in that quilt more than I've probably done on all her other quilts combined. So lots of tying off and lots of cutting. But I think the more you do something, the more you know which creative licenses you can take, right? The more you make a recipe, the more you kind of know what you can finagle. And so I feel comfortable making some of those creative choices with those quilts, but you could definitely tie off if you need to. If I need to match if I need to match a thread color as best as possible, do I go with a lighter shade or darker shade? Again, personal preference, but I'm going to always go with a lighter shade. Just because at least when the thread is lighter, you can still see the texture of the quilting as opposed to when it's darker. Sometimes you can't see that. And not that I would suggest you do this on a customer quilt, but if you quilt with lighter thread, if it's too noticeable, you can always go in and color it in with a fabric marker so you can't see it. One question I don't think that I got asked is monofilament thread. So if I had to quilt a bigger face and it had to be like all over, I would maybe consider using a monofilament thread. It's clear thread, it looks kind of like fishing line, and it really does disappear into it. That's especially if I'm doing like even applique quilts with a lot of different colors and I don't want the quilting to show up at all. It's a little bit more finicky to work with. You have to slow down a bit, but it really does kind of disappear into it. As a general rule, though, I don't like to use that because I kind of want my quilting to show, but that would be kind of an example then. Elizabeth Hartman's quilt, did I quilt it all at one or do the faces first? Oh, okay, the bear, I'm guessing. I would have done it all at once, but like I said, the first couple rows, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do in these bear faces. And I might have called them bad names because they were really kind of overwhelming. I don't know why. So I skipped them for a while. And then eventually I'm like, okay, I need to figure this out. And then I did. So I started, with just the backgrounds, but then I ended up doing it all at once. And that's kind of, and couldn't really see it, but that's why I had the feathers kind of wrapping kind of in between them because it kind of broke that feather up into chunks, and I could quilt a bear and a feather and a bear and a feather and work my way across that way. When doing a pieced animal face, how do I disguise the seams, or how can you disguise the seams? Doing a design over it kind of helps. Like anytime you have like a design that goes over an area, it kind of cues us that like, hey, this is one piece, even if it's multiple. So really the quilting just kind of takes care of that. There's not a whole lot you can do if the seams are really obvious. One thing that comes to mind is, remember when piecing with white background solid was like the thing, which is beautiful. But the problem with white background solid is sometimes you can see the fabric through it or the seam, and there really isn't a whole lot you can do. Now the good thing is nobody's probably looking this close to your quilt either, so you don't have to worry too much about that. When I quilt on areas such as a bare nose or smaller dot patterns, do I use a straight edge ruler to make sure the lines are straight? Yes. All of those quilts I've quilted on a long arm. All of Tula's I do on a long arm because it's much faster, and gosh, it would take me forever to do her quilts on the sewing machine. So yes, on a long arm I'm always using a straight edge ruler, really for all the straight lines, diagonals and horizontal and vertical. If they're shorter, horizontal or vertical, I'll kind of freehand it, or if I'm like in a rush and getting kind of lazy, I might go a little bit longer. But those diagonal lines are too tricky to do on a long arm without the ruler for me. On a sewing machine, it's a little different because I can reposition the quilt. So on a sewing machine, it's 50-50. Just kind of depends on how I'm feeling and how long that line is. But I'm glad, I hope those help to answer the questions. If you're not watching live, no worries. You can leave your questions in the comment section, and I get on there from time to time and answer them. But I really have to like kind of end on this note. No matter what quilt you're working on, whether it's faces or animals or big or little or middle size, there's no wrong way to quilt it. When you're done and you're finished with it, you're going to have a finished quilt, and that's always better than a perfect quilt top. And something about quilting, when you're this close to it, you can see every little mistake and you're just so sure it's just not going to look good. But once you throw it in the washer and you bring it out, it's no longer the individual parts. It's not the pattern, the fabric, the quilting. It's just the quilt. And soon you won't even notice the quilting anymore. So don't let that fear kind of stop you, even if they are mid-sized faces, because that's my fear there. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back next Thursday with another live chat. I don't have a topic yet, but I'm sure one will come up, maybe in the comments. And I hope you can join me then. I really appreciate your time spending the afternoon with me. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And until next week, happy quilting.